The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the corner of our dining room, casting a warm glow over the faces of our gathered families. My husband Daniel had outdone himself with the decorations that year. Fresh pine garlands draped along the mantel, hand-picked ornaments from our travels adorning the tree, and delicate crystal snowflakes hanging from the chandelier above our extended dining table. It had been a good year for us, or so everyone thought. I had finally secured the marketing director position I had been eyeing for 3 years, and Daniel's architectural firm had landed 2 major contracts that autumn. From the outside, we were the picture of success, the couple who had it all. I raised my glass of champagne, feeling the cool crystal against my fingertips as I smiled at my mother-in-law across the table. My son Tyler sat beside her, his 8-year-old face beaming with holiday excitement. Everyone had already eaten too much of the prime rib dinner Daniel had insisted on preparing himself. It had been delicious, of course. Daniel had always been meticulous about details. Before dessert, Daniel announced, standing at the head of the table with a remote control in his hand. I've prepared a little year-in-review slideshow. It's been quite a year for the Mitchell family. My stomach tightened slightly. This hadn't been on our planned agenda for the evening. Daniel hadn't mentioned any slideshow to me, but I smiled and nodded encouragingly as he dimmed the lights, and the large television screen on the wall flickered to life. First, let's celebrate Vanessa's incredible achievement. Daniel's voice was steady as the screen showed a photo of me accepting my promotion certificate. The gathered family members clapped, and my father raised his glass in my direction. She worked so hard for this promotion. The slideshow continued, showing Tyler's baseball tournament from the summer, our weekend trip to Aspen in the fall, and Daniel's firm winning a prestigious design award. Each image passed with warm murmurs of appreciation from our gathered loved ones. I began to relax, taking another sip of champagne. This was sweet of Daniel, I thought. He had always been thoughtful that way. And now, Daniel continued, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly, I'd like to share some of Vanessa's other achievements from this past year. The screen changed, and my breath caught in my throat. There it was, a photo of me entering the Westlake Hotel downtown. The timestamp in the corner read July 15th, 2025, 3:17 in the afternoon. I was wearing my blue dress, the one I told Daniel I had bought for client meetings. In the photo, a man's hand was clearly visible on the small of my back as we walked through the revolving door. The room fell silent. My champagne glass froze halfway to my lips. This was taken on a Tuesday, Daniel said evenly. Vanessa had told me she was meeting with the Henderson account that afternoon. The next slide appeared, a screenshot of text messages between me and a contact listed as J. The messages were explicit, discussing our last encounter and planning the next. The date stamp matched the hotel photo. My mother gasped. Someone, I think it was Daniel's sister, whispered, "Oh my God." I couldn't look at Tyler, couldn't bear to see his innocent face trying to process what was happening. My fingers had gone numb around my glass. "Daniel," I finally managed to whisper, "what are you doing?" He didn't answer me. Instead, he clicked to the next slide. This one showed a credit card statement with several charges highlighted. Room service at the Westlake, a jewelry purchase from a shop I had never mentioned visiting, a receipt for dinner at Marcello's, on a night I had claimed to be working late. "I've been collecting these for months," Daniel said to the silent room, his voice now carrying an edge I had never heard before. "There's quite a story here, isn't there, Vanessa?" My father stood up abruptly. "I think the children should leave the room," he said, looking pointedly at Tyler and Daniel's young nieces. "No," Daniel countered calmly. "I think it's important that everyone sees who Vanessa really is. The truth has been hidden long enough." I tried to stand, but my legs felt leaden. The room seemed to be spinning slightly as panic surged through me. "Daniel, please. We can discuss this privately. Like you privately discussed our marriage with your lover." Daniel's voice remained controlled, but his eyes were cold as winter. No, I think we're past private discussions now. He clicked to the next slide. This one was worse, a photo taken through what appeared to be a hotel window. The curtains were partially open, and though the image was somewhat distant, there was no mistaking me in the arms of Jason, my colleague from the marketing department. My blood turned to ice as I realized the extent of Daniel's investigation. "How did you—" I began, but Daniel cut me off. "How did I know? How did I get these?" He gave a mirthless laugh. "You got sloppy, Vanessa. You repeated patterns. Same hotel, same day of the week. And you underestimated how much I pay attention." My mother-in-law began quietly ushering Tyler from the room, despite Daniel's earlier objection. I was grateful for her intervention, even as shame burned through me like acid. Tyler looked back at me, confusion and fear written across his young face. "Mom?" he called out, his voice small and uncertain. "It's okay, sweetheart," I managed to say, though nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. "Go with Grandma for a minute." As Tyler disappeared into the kitchen with his grandmother, Daniel continued the slideshow. More photos, more text messages, more evidence of my betrayal laid bare before our closest friends and family on what was supposed to be a joyful Christmas celebration. "I had planned to announce our family trip to Hawaii tonight," Daniel said, his voice finally cracking slightly with emotion. "I've been saving for it all year. Tyler was so excited when I told him last week. Tears stung my eyes as I realized what I had destroyed, what Daniel had planned, and how thoroughly he had documented my deception. The slideshow continued relentlessly, each new image another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I never saw the last slide coming, never imagined he had gone so far in his investigation. But as the video began to play, security footage from the hotel elevator showing Jason and me in an unmistakable embrace, I knew it was over. Everything was over. My affair with Jason began innocently enough, as these things often did. We were assigned to the same project team in March, working late nights to secure the Henderson account that would put our agency on the map for luxury hospitality marketing. Jason was creative, attentive, and most dangerously, he listened in a way Daniel hadn't in years. Daniel and I had been married for 10 years by then. We had settled into the comfortable rhythm that long-term couples often find. Predictable date nights every other Friday, quick pecks on the cheek as we passed in the kitchen, conversations that revolved around Tyler's school activities and our work schedules. It wasn't that Daniel was a bad husband. He wasn't. He was reliable, steady, a wonderful father to Tyler. But somewhere along the way, the passion had cooled to a barely perceptible warmth. Jason noticed things. He commented on my new haircut the day I got it, while Daniel hadn't mentioned it until 3 days later. Jason remembered how I took my coffee after I mentioned it once in passing. He laughed at my jokes and asked follow-up questions about my ideas in meetings. It was intoxicating to be seen again, to feel interesting and desired. The first time we crossed the line was after securing the Henderson account. The team had gone out for celebratory drinks, and as the night wore on, others had drifted away until only Jason and I remained at the corner table of the darkened bar. His hand had brushed mine as he reached for his glass, and neither of us pulled away. Later, in the parking lot, we kissed for the first time, and I felt a rush I hadn't experienced in years. I lied to Daniel that night, saying the team dinner had run late. It was the first of many lies that became increasingly elaborate as the affair progressed. I created fictional client meetings, invented work emergencies, and fabricated girls' nights out with colleagues Daniel had never met. I maintained separate text chains with actual female coworkers, asking them to cover for me if Daniel ever checked. He never did, or so I thought. The Westlake Hotel became our regular meeting place. Jason would book the room under his name, and I would arrive separately, usually claiming to be working late. The hotel was only 15 minutes from my office, but in the opposite direction from our suburban home, making it unlikely I would run into anyone who knew me. The staff came to recognize us but maintained the discreet professionalism that expensive hotels pride themselves on. I became expert at managing the details. I kept a change of clothes in my office to avoid coming home in wrinkled outfits. I showered at the hotel before leaving to wash away any lingering scent of Jason's cologne. I even maintained a separate credit card that Daniel didn't know about, which I used for any expenses related to the affair. I thought I had covered every angle, eliminated every risk of exposure. At home, I compensated for my guilt by being extra attentive to Tyler and Daniel when I was present. I volunteered for Tyler's school events, helped with homework, and made his favorite meals. With Daniel, I initiated intimacy more frequently than before, hoping to mask any suspicions he might have about my emotional distance. I suggested weekend trips and date nights, carefully scheduled around my meetings with Jason. The promotion to marketing director came in October, a position I had genuinely earned through hard work and talent. But it also provided more freedom in my schedule and a legitimate reason for occasional overnight business trips. Jason and I took full advantage, spending a weekend in Vail that I claimed was a marketing retreat, and later, 3 days in Chicago for a conference that I actually attended for only 1 day. In my deluded confidence, I even began leaving small clues where I thought Daniel wouldn't notice. I saved a matchbook from a restaurant Jason and I had visited in my jewelry box. I kept a hotel key card as a bookmark in a novel on my nightstand. Looking back, I realized these were subconscious cries for attention, perhaps even for consequences. Some part of me wanted to be caught, to end the exhausting double life I was leading. Daniel, meanwhile, had been quietly observant. While I thought he was absorbed in his architectural projects and oblivious to my comings and goings, he had been taking note of discrepancies in my stories. The night I claimed to be at dinner with my friend Sarah, but had no memory of what she'd ordered. The conference call that supposedly ran until 11 at night, but produced no emails the following morning. The business trip to Chicago where my expense report showed only 1 night at the hotel, not 3. If you're enjoying this story of deception and its consequences, make sure to subscribe for more stories about relationships, betrayal, and justice. Real life is often more compelling than fiction, and there are always 2 sides to every story. Though sometimes, as in Vanessa's case, one side is clearly in the wrong. While I was constructing my elaborate web of lies, Daniel was methodically gathering evidence. He installed tracking software on my phone during an evening when I had carelessly left it charging in the kitchen. He hired a private investigator who took the damning photos of Jason and me entering and leaving the Westlake. He even gained access to my secret credit card statements by intercepting mail at our house. Mail I thought I had been careful to redirect to a post office box. What I never suspected was that Daniel had known about the affair for months before that Christmas dinner. He had discovered the first concrete evidence in July, a receipt from the Westlake that had accidentally printed to our home office printer when my phone had connected to our Wi-Fi. Instead of confronting me immediately, he made the calculated decision to build an irrefutable case. Each time I lied about my whereabouts, he added another piece to his collection. Each time I came home late smelling of hotel soap, he noted it in a journal he kept locked in his desk drawer. During those months of his silent investigation, I misinterpreted his emotional withdrawal as work stress, or perhaps even midlife malaise. When he stopped asking as many questions about my late nights, I thought I had successfully normalized my erratic schedule in his mind. When he suggested I take more time for myself, encouraging me to go out with friends more often, I viewed it as supportive, never imagining he was creating opportunities to catch me in lies. The most painful irony was that as my affair with Jason intensified, Daniel was planning what should have been a dream family vacation to Hawaii. He had been setting aside money from each paycheck, researching resorts with kid-friendly activities for Tyler, and even learning basic Hawaiian phrases to surprise us, all while knowing his marriage was crumbling because of my betrayal. By November, I had convinced myself that I had achieved the perfect balance. My professional life was flourishing with the director position, bringing increased respect and a substantial salary bump. At home, Tyler seemed happy and well-adjusted, blissfully unaware of his mother's deception. And Daniel, I believed, was contentedly focused on his architectural projects, occasionally mentioning plans for our future together that I non-committally agreed to while mentally compartmentalizing my parallel life with Jason. The affair had settled into a comfortable rhythm by then. Jason and I met at the Westlake every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, with our standing excuse being a recurring client meeting. We had our favorite room on the 11th floor with a view of the mountains, and the hotel staff knew us well enough to have champagne waiting. There was a heady thrill to having established such a reliable pattern for our indiscretions. In my hubris, I mistook familiarity for safety. "I think we should take a real trip together," Jason suggested one Thursday in mid-November, as we lay in the hotel bed, Denver's early winter twilight casting long shadows across the room. Maybe Mexico after the holidays? A week on the beach? I laughed and traced patterns on his chest with my fingertip. And what would I tell Daniel? That I'm inspecting resort properties for a potential client? Why not? Jason propped himself up on one elbow. "You've managed everything else perfectly so far. He doesn't suspect a thing." His words reinforced my dangerous confidence. It was true. In my mind, Daniel remained completely in the dark. Just the previous weekend, we had attended a dinner party with his colleagues where he had proudly introduced me as my brilliant wife, the new marketing director. I had played my part flawlessly, discussing our family plans for the holidays and reminiscing about our early days together for the entertainment of his coworkers. Daniel had squeezed my hand under the table during dessert, a gesture I interpreted as affection, but later realized was laced with bitter irony. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with the usual seasonal activities: Tyler's school holiday concert, shopping for gifts, decorating our home. I threw myself into these tasks with compensatory enthusiasm, as though perfect Christmas preparations could somehow balance the moral ledger of my infidelity. I selected thoughtful gifts for Daniel: an expensive watch he had admired months earlier, rare first editions of architectural books he collected, a custom-designed tie clip bearing Tyler's birth date in Roman numerals. My confidence was further bolstered when Daniel suggested I take the lead on planning our Christmas dinner. "You're so good at bringing people together," he had said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a detail I failed to notice at the time. "Just let me know what you need me to do." I arranged everything, invited both sets of parents, his sister's family and my brother, ordered the prime rib that Daniel ultimately insisted on preparing himself, selected the wines and created elaborate place settings with calligraphed name cards. When Daniel mentioned wanting to make a special announcement at dinner, I assumed it would be about the promotion I had already received, or perhaps his firm's recent success. The idea that he might have planned something entirely different never crossed my mind. The weekend before Christmas, Jason gave me a platinum bracelet with a small diamond charm, far too expensive and personal to explain away as a colleague gift. Against better judgment, I kept it, hidden in my gym bag where I thought Daniel would never look. Jason and I made plans to meet on December 26th, the day after Christmas, for what we called our private holiday celebration. I had already prepared my excuse: post-holiday sales I wanted to shop, giving Daniel time alone with Tyler to play with his new Christmas gifts. "Will you miss me tomorrow?" Jason asked during our last meeting before Christmas, on December 23rd. We had broken our usual Tuesday-Thursday pattern due to the holiday week, another deviation from routine that I didn't recognize as significant. "Of course," I assured him, kissing him goodbye at the hotel room door. "But it's just one day with family. I'll see you on the 26th. As I drove home that evening, I mentally rehearsed the next few days: the final Christmas preparations, the family dinner, the careful balance of attention between my husband, my son, and our extended family. I felt completely in control, the director not just of marketing campaigns, but of my entire complicated life. Never once did I imagine that Daniel had been directing a narrative of his own, one that would climax during our carefully orchestrated Christmas dinner. The signs were there, had I been paying attention. Daniel had been unusually insistent about certain details of the dinner: the seating arrangement, making sure the large television was working properly, suggesting we use the good crystal that had belonged to his grandmother. He had disappeared into his home office for hours during the preceding weeks, the door firmly closed, emerging with forced smiles and vague explanations about year-end projects. Most tellingly, he had taken Tyler aside the week before Christmas for what he called man-to-man talk about surprises. Tyler had been bursting with excitement afterward, but remarkably tight-lipped when I tried to discover what they had discussed. "Dad said it's a big surprise for Christmas," was all my son would say, his eyes shining with the thrill of keeping a secret from me, not realizing how many secrets I had been keeping from him. The day before Christmas, Daniel's normally impeccable planning had a small hiccup when he couldn't find his laptop charger. I had helpfully suggested he use mine. "They're not compatible," he'd said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Mine is the newer model." He had left the house shortly after, returning an hour later with not just a charger, but a small shopping bag he had taken directly to his office. I had assumed it contained a last-minute gift for me. In a sense, it was. The final pieces of evidence he needed to complete his Christmas presentation, the slideshow that would destroy the illusion of security I had so carefully constructed over the previous 9 months. The first concrete sign that Daniel suspected something came in mid-July, though I was too absorbed in my affair to recognize its significance. We had been preparing for bed, the summer night still warm enough that the windows were open, carrying the distant sounds of neighborhood children playing late in the lingering twilight. "You've been working with the Henderson account a lot lately," Daniel remarked casually as he folded clothes from the clean laundry basket. "Isn't that the hospitality group? The one with the downtown hotels?" "Among others," I answered, applying night cream to my face at the vanity. "They have properties in 5 states. We're handling their full rebranding." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Which hotel do you usually meet them at? The Westlake? I hear their conference facilities are excellent." My heart had skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral in the mirror. "Sometimes. They have corporate offices downtown, too." The lie came easily. Practiced. "Why do you ask?" "No reason," Daniel shrugged. "One of my clients mentioned staying there recently. Thought maybe you'd crossed paths." I had dismissed the exchange at the time, but looking back, it was the first thread being pulled in the unraveling of my deception. Daniel had been testing me, seeing how easily I would lie to his face. What I didn't know was that he had already found the Westlake receipt that had accidentally printed to our home printer when my phone had connected to our Wi-Fi earlier that day. A receipt for room service charging 2 entrees and a bottle of champagne to a room registered under Jason's name. In August, Daniel suggested we upgrade our phones. "The family plan has a good deal right now," he had explained, helping me set up the new device. What I didn't realize was that he used this opportunity to install tracking software before handing the phone to me. For weeks afterward, he had known exactly where I went on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, watching the dot on his screen travel not to the client offices I claimed to be visiting, but to the Westlake Hotel, where it would remain stationary for approximately 2 hours before moving again. By September, Daniel had begun building his case methodically. He hired a private investigator, a college friend who owed him a favor and would be discreet. This man took the photos of Jason and me entering and leaving the hotel, captured the image through the partially open curtains, and compiled a detailed report of our patterns. Daniel had received the first batch of photos on September 21st, the day before our 10th wedding anniversary. We had celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant, where I had given a heartfelt toast to 10 more years of honesty and partnership that Daniel had met with a tight smile. In October, when I was away at the Chicago conference, Daniel had used my absence to search the house thoroughly. He found the matchbook from the restaurant in my jewelry box, the hotel keycard in my novel, and most damning of all, a handwritten note from Jason hidden in the lining of my gym bag, along with the platinum bracelet I would receive weeks later. The note contained explicit references to our encounters and plans for future meetings. Daniel had photographed everything, carefully returning each item exactly where he had found it, never letting on that he had discovered these tokens of my betrayal. The first time I noticed something truly amiss was in early November. I had been working late one evening, actually working for once, not meeting Jason, when I received a text from Daniel asking if I was still at the office. I confirmed that I was, and minutes later, my office phone rang. It was the main reception desk, saying my husband was in the lobby. "Send him up," I said, quickly scanning my desk for anything incriminating and finding nothing. When Daniel appeared at my office door with a takeout bag from my favorite restaurant, I was genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thought you could use dinner if you're working late," he said, setting up the containers on my conference table. He glanced around my office casually, noting the stacks of papers, the campaign mock-ups on the walls, the genuine evidence of work in progress. "This is a surprise," I said, joining him at the table. "Is it?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that momentarily unsettled me. "I like to know where you are, Vanessa." Something in his tone sent a chill through me, but I dismissed it, attributing his strange mood to work stress or perhaps resentment about my long hours. We ate dinner together in my office, discussing Tyler's upcoming science project and holiday plans. Before leaving, Daniel had kissed me goodbye with unusual deliberation, as though memorizing the moment. "I love you, Vanessa," he had said, his hand lingering on my face. "I've always loved you. Remember that." It was the closest he came to revealing his knowledge before the Christmas dinner exposure. In retrospect, it had been both a genuine expression of his feelings and a warning I completely missed. Throughout November and December, Daniel created more opportunities to gather evidence. He suggested I use his laptop when mine was allegedly running slow, knowing I would likely check my email and perhaps leave traces in the browser history. He encouraged me to take a girls' weekend with friends, then use the time to thoroughly examine my personal credit card statements that had been delivered in my absence. He even struck up a friendship with a hotel employee at the Westlake through an architectural project, gaining access to security footage that would later feature in his Christmas slideshow. The most calculated move came 2 weeks before Christmas, when Daniel suggested we open a joint investment account for Tyler's college fund. This required gathering our financial documents, during which he discovered my secret credit card statements that had been delivered to our home address, despite my attempts to have them sent elsewhere. Instead of confronting me, he had photocopied the statements, noting the charges from the Westlake Hotel, restaurants I had visited with Jason, and the jewelry store where the platinum bracelet had been purchased. "Is there anything else I should know about our finances before we set up this account?" Daniel had asked, giving me a perfect opportunity to come clean. "No, everything's in those statements," I had assured him, referring only to the documents I had selectively shared, unaware that he had already found what I had hidden. The final piece fell into place the weekend before Christmas, when Daniel insisted on doing the family holiday shopping alone with Tyler. "Man time," he had called it with a wink to our son. What I didn't know was that during this outing, he had purchased a portable projector as a backup for his slideshow plan, and had explained to Tyler that there would be a special family movie at Christmas dinner. My son had kept the secret faithfully, excited to be part of his father's surprise without understanding its devastating nature. 3 days before Christmas, Daniel had come home early and caught me on the phone with Jason. I had quickly ended the call when I heard the front door, but Daniel had stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching me with an unreadable expression. "Important call?" he had asked quietly. "Just work," I had replied, setting my phone face down on the nightstand. "Henderson account follow-up." Daniel had nodded slowly. "You know what I admire about you, Vanessa? Your dedication. When you commit to something, you really see it through." The double meaning sailed past me completely at the time. I had even felt a flush of pride at what I perceived as his compliment, oblivious to the fact that he was acknowledging not my professional dedication, but my sustained commitment to deceiving him. That night, as we lay in bed, Daniel had propped himself up on one elbow and studied my face in the darkness. "Are you happy with our life, Vanessa?" he had asked softly. Caught off guard by the question, I had given him a partial truth. "Of course, we have a beautiful home, a wonderful son, good careers. What's not to be happy about?" "That's not what I asked," Daniel had pressed. "I asked if you were happy with our life, our marriage." For a moment, I had considered honesty, The question had created a brief opening where confession seemed possible. But fear had won out. Fear of consequences, of losing the stability I had convinced myself I still wanted alongside the excitement of the affair. "I'm happy with you, Daniel," I had said, kissing him to end the conversation. "Now let's get some sleep. We have a busy few days ahead." He had held me longer than usual that night, and I had mistaken his embrace for affection rather than what it truly was. A farewell to the marriage he had already decided was over, a final moment of closeness before he executed the plan that had been months in the making. As the Christmas dinner slideshow continued in our dining room, the evidence of my infidelity mounted with each new image Daniel displayed. My mother had covered her mouth with her napkin, her eyes wide with shock and disappointment. My father sat rigidly beside her, his jaw clenched in that familiar way that signaled his barely contained anger. Daniel's sister had pulled her daughters close, as if to shield them from the moral contagion of my actions. "Daniel, please," I said, finding my voice at last. "Not like this. Not in front of everyone." "Why not?" Daniel asked, his voice eerily calm as he clicked to the next slide, a compilation of timestamps showing my location at the Westlake Hotel over multiple dates. "Isn't this what you wanted? An audience? You've been performing for months, Vanessa. I'm just making sure everyone sees the whole show." My father stood again, this time more decisively. "Daniel, I understand you're hurt. God knows you have every right to be. But the children already left the room." Daniel cut him off. "And Tyler deserves to know why his family is about to change forever. Not the details, but the truth that his mother has been lying to all of us." The word lying hung in the air like poison. I looked desperately toward the kitchen, grateful that Tyler was out of earshot, being distracted by his grandmother. But everyone else I loved, my parents, Daniel's parents, our closest friends, witnessed my humiliation in real time, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to pity. "Who is he?" Daniel's father finally asked, breaking the horrified silence that had fallen over the dining room. Daniel answered before I could. "Jason Reynolds, Vanessa's colleague from the marketing department, married with 2 young daughters." He clicked to a slide showing Jason's professional headshot from the company website alongside a family photo apparently taken from social media. His wife doesn't know yet, but she will after tonight. The additional revelation that Jason was also married sent another wave of murmurs through the room. I hadn't known about his daughters. He had mentioned a wife but had been vague about children. The realization that I hadn't even bothered to learn this basic information about the man I had risked everything for made me feel physically ill. "How could you do this to Daniel?" my mother finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To Tyler." I had no answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. No explanation that could possibly justify the pain reflected in the faces surrounding our Christmas table. The carefully constructed narrative of my happy marriage had been shattered beyond repair, leaving only the ugly reality of my betrayal. "I think what hurts the most," Daniel continued, clicking through more evidence, receipts, text messages, location data, "isn't the sex. It's the elaborate deception, the hundreds of lies, the planning that went into maintaining this affair for 9 months." He paused on a calendar view, showing my actual whereabouts, juxtaposed with what I had told him on those same dates. The systematic nature of my deception, laid out in this clinical format, made it seem even more calculated and cruel. "Look at October 12th, Daniel instructed the stunned audience. Vanessa told me she was at an all-day strategy session. She was actually in a hotel room from 1 in the afternoon until 5:30. October 19th, another client meeting that was really a 4-hour hotel stay. November 2nd, November 9th, November 16th. The pattern continues. My brother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Jesus, Vanessa, what were you thinking?" "She was thinking she wouldn't get caught," Daniel answered for me. "She was thinking her husband was too stupid, too trusting, too absorbed in his own work to notice the signs." That's not true, I protested weakly. I never thought you were stupid. No? Daniel raised an eyebrow. Then what did you think? That I wouldn't care? That our marriage vows meant so little that I would just accept this if I found out? Before I could respond, he clicked to the next slide. This one showed my secret credit card statement with charges highlighted in angry red. The hotel rooms, the room service, dinners at restaurants I had never mentioned visiting. I found these statements in November, Daniel explained to our captive audience. Vanessa has a credit card I knew nothing about. She used it to fund her affair. My father-in-law, who had worked in banking his entire career, shook his head in disgust. Financial infidelity on top of everything else, he muttered. Did you think about Tyler at all? Daniel's sister asked, her protective maternal instinct clearly triggered. About what this would do to him when it came out. The mention of our son pierced through my shock like a physical pain. Of course I had thought about Tyler, or rather, I had deliberately avoided thinking about him in the context of my affair. I had compartmentalized, convincing myself that what Tyler didn't know couldn't hurt him, that I could be both a good mother and an unfaithful wife without the two realities ever colliding. I love my son, I said, my voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt him. But you were willing to risk it, Daniel countered. Every time you lied about where you were going, every time you missed one of his games for a hotel rendezvous, every time you brought your affair partner's energy back into our home, you were risking Tyler's happiness and security. If you're feeling outraged by Vanessa's betrayal and the web of lies she created, please hit like on this video. What she did to Daniel and Tyler was unconscionable, destroying the trust that should be the foundation of any family. The slideshow continued relentlessly. Daniel had been thorough in his investigation, documenting not just my meetings with Jason, but the elaborate cover stories I had created. He displayed screenshots of emails I had sent him explaining my late nights, juxtaposed with hotel check-in times that proved I had been lying. He showed photos of the bracelet Jason had given me, which the private investigator had apparently spotted on my wrist as I left the hotel. I gave you every opportunity to tell the truth, Daniel said, his voice finally showing signs of the emotional strain he had been under. I asked you directly if you were happy in our marriage. I asked if there was anything I should know about our finances. I even asked about your late meetings, giving you the perfect opening to come clean. It was true. Looking back, I could see the moments when Daniel had offered me the chance to confess, to end the deception before it reached this catastrophic conclusion. But each time, I had chosen to preserve the affair, to protect the exciting parallel life I had built with Jason, rather than honor the family I had created with Daniel. I want everyone here to understand something. Daniel addressed the room, setting down the remote control for the first time since beginning the slideshow. I didn't do this to humiliate Vanessa, though I understand it feels that way. I did this because I needed witnesses. I needed all of you to see the truth so that there could be no rewriting of this story later. No claiming it was a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. No painting me as the villain when I take the necessary steps to protect myself and Tyler going forward. My mother began to cry quietly, her hand reaching for my father's across the table. They had been married for 41 years without a hint of infidelity. In their world, marriage vows were sacred, unbreakable. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in their eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered, though the words felt hopelessly inadequate. I'm so sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? Daniel asked, voicing the question that was undoubtedly on everyone's mind. Before I could answer, he clicked to what I prayed was the final slide. It wasn't. Instead, the screen filled with an image of legal documents, papers I recognized immediately as divorce filings. The heading was clearly visible. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I filed these yesterday, Daniel explained calmly. My attorney suggested waiting until after the holidays, but I didn't want to start the new year with this hanging over us. The papers will be officially served the day after tomorrow. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. Despite the overwhelming evidence, despite the public exposure of my affair, some part of me had still hoped there might be a path to reconciliation, a way to repair what I had broken. Daniel's next words extinguished that hope completely. "I've documented everything for the court," he continued. "I'm seeking primary custody of Tyler, with supervised visitation for Vanessa initially. Given the pattern of deception and poor judgment she's displayed, I believe this is in our son's best interest until she can demonstrate more stability." "You can't take my son," I said, panic rising in my chest. "I'm not taking him from you," Daniel replied. "I'm protecting him from the fallout of your choices, and I'm giving you the opportunity to rebuild a relationship with him based on honesty going forward." As if on cue, Tyler's voice called from the kitchen. "Can I come back now? Is the surprise over?" The room fell silent as the innocent question hung in the air. Daniel and I locked eyes across the table, a world of pain and betrayal between us. "Yes, buddy," Daniel called back, his voice softening for our son's benefit. "You can come back. The surprise is over." But everyone in that room knew the truth. The real consequences were just beginning. As Tyler re-entered the dining room with his grandmother, Daniel quickly switched the television to a benign Christmas movie that had been queued up for this purpose. The abrupt transition from my exposed infidelity to cheerful holiday animation created a surreal contrast that made me feel as though I was trapped in some bizarre nightmare. "Did I miss the big surprise?" Tyler asked, looking confused at the tension that still hung heavy in the air. Daniel went to him, kneeling to meet our son at eye level. "Part of it, buddy. We'll talk about everything tomorrow, okay? Right now, why don't you take your cousins upstairs to show them your new video game?" It was a transparent attempt to remove the children from the aftermath of the confrontation, but Tyler accepted the suggestion eagerly, always happy to showcase his games. As the children disappeared upstairs, the adults remained in suspended animation, no one quite sure how to proceed with the dinner that had been so thoroughly derailed. Daniel's sister was the first to move, standing abruptly. "We should go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Dave, get the girls' coats." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Please stay. We still have dessert, and Tyler would be disappointed if everyone left early. This is still Christmas dinner." The absurdity of continuing our holiday celebration after what had just transpired struck me as cruel, but I recognized it as another calculated move on Daniel's part, maintaining normalcy for Tyler while ensuring I couldn't escape the consequences of my actions by having the gathering dissolve. As Daniel went to the kitchen to bring out the dessert, a task that should have been mine as hostess, I seized the opportunity to begin damage control. "It wasn't what it looked like," I said quietly but urgently to the remaining adults. "Daniel has taken things out of context." My father snorted in disbelief. "Vanessa, don't. We all saw the evidence. Don't make this worse by lying to our faces." "I'm not lying," I insisted, desperation making my voice shake. "Yes, I made a terrible mistake with Jason. But it wasn't this calculated, ongoing thing Daniel is making it out to be. We met a few times, not dozens. Most of those hotel visits were legitimate client meetings." My mother looked at me with such disappointment that I almost couldn't continue. But panic drove me forward, grasping at any chance to salvage some shred of my reputation. "And those texts could have been from anyone," I continued. "Daniel could have created those. You know how good he is with technology." Daniel's father, who had been silently seething, finally erupted. "For God's sake, Vanessa, you were caught on video entering a hotel with another man. There are time-stamped photos of you in his arms. Your own credit card statements show the charges. Stop insulting our intelligence." Daniel returned with the dessert, a Christmas trifle I had prepared the day before, setting it in the center of the table with deliberate care. "Trying to deny it already?" he asked, having clearly overheard my attempts. That didn't take long. "You're making it sound worse than it was," I said, pivoting to a different defense. "You're acting like I never loved you, like our entire marriage was a lie. That's not fair." "Fair?" Daniel repeated, his controlled demeanor finally cracking slightly. "You want to talk about fair?" Was it fair to Tyler when you missed his baseball championship because you told us you had a work emergency, but you were actually in a hotel with Jason? Was it fair to me when you came home from Chicago a day later than your conference ended because you were extending your time with him? Was it fair to Jason's wife and daughters when you helped him betray them? Each example landed like a blow, especially the mention of Tyler's baseball championship. I had indeed missed it, had seen the photos Daniel took of our son's team celebrating their victory without me there to witness it. The memory of Tyler's disappointed face when I arrived home late that evening, the championship already over, made me physically flinch. I made mistakes, I admitted, shifting tactics again. Terrible mistakes that I regret deeply. But don't throw away 10 years of marriage, everything we've built together, because of this. We can work through this. Go to counseling. There's nothing to work through, Daniel interrupted flatly. You know what the therapist we saw for premarital counseling said? She said infidelity isn't about sex, it's about betrayal of trust. And trust, once broken so completely, can never be fully restored. That's not true, I argued, looking around the table for support and finding none. People recover from affairs. Marriages survive this. Some might, Daniel acknowledged, but not ours. Because this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, Vanessa. This was 9 months of calculated deception. Hundreds of lies. You lied to my face every day for 3/4 of a year. My brother, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke up. Vanessa, stop. You're only making this worse. Take responsibility for once. His betrayal, siding with Daniel over his own sister, stung sharply. But I couldn't stop my desperate attempts to rewrite the narrative, to find some interpretation of events that didn't cast me as the villain. What about your part in this, Daniel? I asked, going on the offensive. You checked out of our marriage emotionally years ago. You were so absorbed in your work that you barely noticed me. Jason made me feel valued, appreciated. Stop right there. Daniel cut me off, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't you dare try to blame me for your choices. If you felt neglected, you could have talked to me. You could have suggested counseling. You could have done 1,000 things other than cheat. He was right, of course. The neglect I claimed to have felt was largely invented in retrospect, a convenient justification for my betrayal. Daniel had been a good husband, attentive, supportive, loving. My affair with Jason hadn't been about filling an emotional void. It had been about excitement, novelty, the thrill of the forbidden. And let's be honest about Jason, Daniel continued. Do you think he really cares about you? A man who cheats on his wife and lies to his daughters? Who risks his marriage for hotel afternoons? Is that really the kind of man you're defending right now? Put that way, Jason suddenly seemed far less appealing. I had never considered our affair from this perspective, that by being willing to betray his own family, Jason had revealed a fundamental character flaw that should have been a warning to me rather than an attraction. I don't know what I was thinking, I admitted finally, shifting to contrition as my denials gained no traction. I got caught up in something that felt exciting, and I didn't think about the consequences. But I never stopped loving you and Tyler. Never. This doesn't have to be the end of us. Daniel shook his head slowly. That's where you're wrong. This ended us the moment you made the conscious decision to betray everything we built together. You just didn't know it yet. He began serving the dessert, an absurdly normal action in the midst of our marriage's implosion. No one touched their plates except Daniel's mother, who mechanically took tiny bites while staring at nothing in particular. What about Tyler? I asked, my voice breaking. He needs both his parents. He needs his home, his stability. He'll have both his parents, Daniel assured me, his tone softening slightly at the mention of our son. Just not living in the same house. And as for stability, you shattered that the moment you started living a double life. My father, who had been watching this exchange with increasing discomfort, finally intervened. I think we should leave you two to discuss this privately. This isn't This isn't a conversation for an audience. With all due respect, Daniel replied, that's exactly what it is. Vanessa had her audience, Jason, her co-workers who covered for her, the hotel staff who watched this unfold. Now I have mine, the people who will support us through what comes next, and who now know exactly why our marriage is ending. The deliberate humiliation of having this conversation in front of our families was clearly part of Daniel's plan. He wanted witnesses to my failed attempts at denial, to ensure I couldn't rewrite the narrative later when speaking to friends or family members who hadn't been present for the revelation. The divorce papers include a detailed account of the affair. Daniel continued clinically. I've documented everything: dates, locations, expenses. My lawyer advised full disclosure to strengthen my position regarding custody arrangements. The mention of custody sent another wave of panic through me. You can't take Tyler from me. I'm his mother. I'm not trying to take him from you, Daniel clarified. But I am seeking primary physical custody, with liberal visitation for you once you've established a stable living situation. Joint legal custody, of course. Stable living situation? I repeated. What does that mean? It means you'll be moving out, Daniel stated matter-of-factly. Tonight, preferably. I've already packed some of your essentials. Your parents can take you in temporarily, I assume. My mother nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. The realization that Daniel had planned even this detail, my exile from our family home on Christmas night, made me understand just how thoroughly he had thought through the consequences of his revelation. You planned all of this, I said, the full scope of his strategy finally dawning on me. The timing, the slideshow, the divorce filing, having everyone here as witnesses. You've been planning this for months. Yes, Daniel admitted without hesitation. Just as meticulously as you planned your affair. The difference is, my planning was to protect myself and our son. Yours was purely selfish. There was no defense against the truth of his words. My attempts to deny, minimize, or justify my actions had fallen flat in the face of overwhelming evidence and the united front of our families, who clearly saw me as the wrongdoer and Daniel as the wronged. As the reality of my situation sank in, that I would be leaving my home that night, that my marriage was irrevocably over, that my relationship with my son would be forever changed, I finally stopped fighting and let the tears come. I'm sorry, I whispered, this time with genuine remorse rather than strategic contrition. I'm so sorry. I know, Daniel said quietly, but it's too late for that now. The remainder of that Christmas dinner passed in a blur of awkward silences and stilted attempts at normal conversation for Tyler's benefit when he returned downstairs. My son, perceptive as always, sensed the tension, but couldn't possibly understand its source. He kept looking between Daniel and me with confused eyes, noticing my tear-stained face and the way no one was eating the dessert he had helped prepare the day before. Is everything okay? He asked finally, his small voice cutting through the artificial cheer Daniel's mother was trying to maintain by commenting on the Christmas tree decorations. Daniel put his arm around our son's shoulders. We'll talk about some changes happening in our family tomorrow, buddy. Tonight is still Christmas. Why don't you show everyone the science project you won first place for? It was a transparent diversion, but Tyler seized it eagerly, running to get his project from the study. As he disappeared from the room, Daniel turned to me. I'll tell him tomorrow that you're going to be staying at Grandma and Grandpa's for a while, he said in a low voice. I won't tell him why yet. He doesn't need those details. But he needs to know that his life is changing and why you won't be here when he wakes up the day after Christmas. The finality of those words, that I wouldn't be in my own home the next morning, wouldn't be there when Tyler woke up, hit me with physical force. I had imagined many possible consequences of my affair if it were discovered, but somehow the simple reality of not being present for my son's morning routine had never occurred to me. Can't I at least stay until tomorrow? I pleaded. Let him have one more normal day? There's nothing normal about pretending, Daniel replied firmly. He's already noticed something's wrong. Dragging it out will only confuse him more. My father stood up, his decision made. We should go soon. It's getting late and, well, there's a lot to process. The idea of leaving with my parents, of being taken home like a disgraced teenager, rather than the successful professional woman I had believed myself to be, was almost unbearable. But I had no alternative. No friend I could call without explaining why I needed emergency housing on Christmas night. No hotel I could check into without reinforcing the very behavior that had destroyed my marriage. As my mother went upstairs to help me pack a suitcase, Daniel followed. In our bedroom, the room we had shared for 10 years, he opened the closet and removed a plastic storage bin I had never seen before. "What's that?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The final piece of evidence," Daniel said, setting the bin on our bed and removing the lid. The one I didn't want to share with our families because it would have been too humiliating for everyone. Inside the bin were dozens of items: hotel receipts, parking stubs, screenshots of text messages printed on paper, photographs, even the matchbook and hotel keycard I had hidden as souvenirs of my affair. But beneath these familiar items was something I hadn't seen before: a small black device that looked like a digital voice recorder. "I found this in your gym bag 2 months ago," Daniel explained, picking up the recorder. "It was in the side pocket. Jason must have accidentally left it there after recording one of your encounters." My blood ran cold. "You didn't listen to it?" "Yes, I did." Daniel's face showed no emotion now, just a flat exhaustion. All 87 minutes of it. Every word, every sound, every time you said his name, every promise you made about our future. The recorder was the anchor proof, the irrefutable evidence that destroyed any possible justification or defense I might have offered. Not just proof of physical infidelity, which might potentially be forgiven, but evidence of the emotional betrayal that had accompanied it. The promises Daniel mentioned. Had I really discussed our future with Jason? Had I really been so reckless, so cruel? "I don't remember saying anything about our future," I whispered, genuinely struggling to recall such a conversation. "You told him you were trapped in our marriage," Daniel said, his voice now showing the first signs of the pain he had been concealing behind his methodical execution of consequences. "You said you stayed with me for Tyler's sake, and for financial security. You said that in a different world, you would have chosen differently." I had no memory of those specific words, but I couldn't deny them either. In the false intimacy of those hotel afternoons, I had said many things to Jason that I didn't truly mean. Exaggerations and outright lies designed to deepen our connection, to justify our affair to ourselves. Words spoken in the heat of passion or in the artificial bubble we had created, never intended to be heard by the husband I had betrayed. "I didn't mean those things," I said desperately. "You know how people say things they don't mean in situations like that." "Do I?" Daniel asked coldly. "No, Vanessa. I don't know how people talk during their adulterous affairs. That's not an experience I've had." My mother, who had been silently removing clothes from my dresser and placing them in a suitcase, finally spoke. "Daniel, please." Whatever she said, whatever she did, she's still Tyler's mother. For Tyler's sake, I'm not playing this recording for everyone to hear," Daniel interrupted. "For Tyler's sake, I'm not telling him the full truth about why his mother is leaving right now. But make no mistake, everything I'm doing is for Tyler's sake, to protect him from the fallout of his mother's choices." The three of us stood in silence for a moment, the recorder sitting between us on the bed like a live grenade. Finally, Daniel picked it up and returned it to the bin. "I won't be using this in the divorce proceedings unless I absolutely have to," he said. "But it exists, and you should know that, in case you're thinking of fighting me on custody. What would you do if you were in Daniel's position, having discovered months of betrayal by your spouse? Would you confront them privately, or expose the truth to everyone who matters? Comment below with how you would handle such a devastating revelation." As my mother finished packing my suitcase, I moved to the bathroom to collect my toiletries. Through the door to Tyler's room, I could see him showing his science project to his cousins, blissfully unaware that his life was about to change irrevocably. The sight of him, so innocent, so vulnerable, finally broke through my self-protective denials. What had I done? How could I have risked this precious child's happiness and security for the temporary excitement of an affair? The weight of my actions crashed down on me all at once, and I leaned against the bathroom counter, suddenly struggling to breathe. When I emerged, Daniel was standing alone in our bedroom, my mother having taken the suitcase downstairs. He looked at me with eyes that held no love, no warmth, only a weary resignation. "I did love you," he said quietly. "Despite what you may have told Jason, our marriage wasn't a trap. It was a choice I made every day, until you made it impossible to choose it anymore." "I know," I whispered. "I loved you too. I still do." Daniel shook his head. "No, Vanessa, you don't. Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't lie for 9 months straight. Love doesn't risk destroying a child's sense of security and trust. What you felt might have been comfort, or habit, or attachment to the life we built. But it wasn't love." He was right. If I had truly loved him with the selfless, protective love that he had shown for Tyler throughout this ordeal, I could never have betrayed him so completely. I had loved the idea of our perfect family, the status of being Daniel's wife, the stability he provided. But I hadn't loved him enough to be faithful, to be honest, to honor the vows we had made. "It's time to go," Daniel said, gesturing toward the hallway. "Tyler deserves at least a goodbye, even if you can't tell him the whole truth yet." I nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. As I moved past Daniel toward the door, he stopped me with one last question. "Was it worth it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. All of this. Was Jason worth losing everything we built together? The answer was so obviously, painfully clear that I didn't bother to respond. Nothing, no affair, no thrill, no temporary passion, could possibly have been worth the devastation I had brought upon my family. Daniel knew that. And now, far too late, so did I. 3 months after that catastrophic Christmas dinner, I sat alone in my small apartment across town, staring at the visitation schedule my lawyer had just emailed me. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed, thanks to my decision not to contest any of Daniel's terms. I had agreed to his custody arrangement, the financial settlement, even the division of property that left him with our family home and most of our shared possessions. Fighting would only have prolonged the pain and possibly exposed Tyler to more details of my betrayal than necessary. The visitation schedule allowed me to see Tyler 3 weekends per month and 1 evening each week for dinner. Daniel had been true to his word about not alienating our son from me, despite having every reason to paint me as the villain. In fact, he had told Tyler only that Mom and Dad can't live together anymore because they have grown-up problems, without mentioning my infidelity. That knowledge would come later, Daniel said, when Tyler was old enough to understand, and only if he asked directly. My parents had supported me financially during the transition, though my father still could barely look me in the eye. My mother visited regularly, bringing home-cooked meals and cleaning my apartment with the nervous energy of someone who doesn't know how else to help. My brother called occasionally, our conversations stilted and superficial. No one in my family had yet forgiven me, though they tried to maintain the appearance of support for Tyler's sake. My professional life had imploded alongside my marriage. Though Daniel had never contacted my company directly, the affair with Jason had become impossible to hide after he was also served divorce papers by his wife. We were both asked to resign to avoid disrupting the workplace. Jason had moved to Chicago shortly afterward, never once reaching out to see how I was coping with the wreckage of our lives. His final text to me had been brief and cowardly. "I think it's best if we don't communicate anymore. I'm sorry things ended this way." I had not contested my termination. The company had been generous with severance, and I had found a lower-paying but stable position at a smaller agency across town. The career trajectory I had been so proud of had been set back years, if not permanently derailed. The marketing director title I had coveted was now attached to a scandal in the minds of everyone in Denver's tight-knit advertising community. The most painful consequence, however, was Tyler's confusion and sadness. Though he didn't know the reasons behind our separation, he felt the effects acutely. He had stopped talking about his baseball games during our visits, had grown quieter and more withdrawn. His teacher had called Daniel to report that Tyler's grades were slipping, and that he had gotten into a fight at school, something that had never happened before. During my last visitation weekend, Tyler had asked the question I had been dreading. "Is it my fault that you left?" The guilt that surged through me at those innocent words was overwhelming. I had assured him repeatedly that nothing was his fault, that I loved him more than anything, that sometimes grown-ups made mistakes that had nothing to do with their children. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't fully believe me. Children always blame themselves for their parents' failures, and Tyler was no exception. Daniel had managed the transition with grace I didn't deserve. He facilitated video calls on nights when Tyler was particularly missing me. He sent me updates about school projects and sports activities. He even invited me to attend Tyler's spring concert, making sure we sat at opposite ends of the auditorium to avoid awkwardness. His civility was not forgiveness, he had made that distinction clear, but rather a commitment to co-parenting despite everything I had done. The last time I had seen Daniel was at the divorce finalization. We had sat in separate parts of the courtroom, our lawyers doing all the talking. Afterward, in the hallway, he had approached me briefly. "I've told Tyler you'll pick him up on Friday at 4, he had said, his voice neutral, businesslike. "He's excited about showing you his new video game." I had nodded, searching his face for any sign of the love that had once been there. Finding none, I had asked the question that had been haunting me since Christmas night. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Daniel had considered this for a long moment before answering. "I've let go of the anger. That's different from forgiveness. I don't wish you ill, Vanessa. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. But trust, once broken that completely, doesn't come back." As he turned to leave, he had paused, looking back at me with an expression that wasn't quite pity but something adjacent to it. You know what the hardest part was? Not the affair itself. It was realizing that I never really knew you. After 10 years of marriage, the mother of my child was essentially a stranger to me. His words had cut deeper than any recrimination or insult could have, because they were true. I had presented a version of myself to Daniel throughout our marriage, the devoted wife, the loving mother, the trustworthy partner, while harboring the capacity for deception that had ultimately destroyed us. He had never known the real me, because I had never fully shown him that person. Now, sitting in my empty apartment with the visitation schedule on my laptop screen, I realized that I was still paying the price for that deception, would still be paying it for years to come. Every time I saw the sadness in Tyler's eyes, the wariness in my parents' faces, the absence of the life I had so carelessly thrown away. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Tyler made the travel baseball team. Practices start next week, games every Saturday. We'll need to adjust the visitation schedule." So practical, so focused on Tyler's needs. No mention of his own feelings, no hint of the pain I knew he must still carry. Daniel had always been the stronger one, the more grounded partner in our relationship. I had taken that strength for granted, had exploited his trust because I believed it would never waver. I typed a reply. "Congratulations to him. Of course we can adjust. Whatever works best for Tyler." As I set my phone down, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. A woman I barely recognized, diminished by consequences she had never fully anticipated. The confident marketing executive was gone, replaced by a part-time mother, a divorcee, a cautionary tale whispered about at industry events. The last thing Daniel had said to me on that Christmas night, as I prepared to leave our home, had become a sort of mantra in my mind. A truth I couldn't escape, no matter how I tried to justify or explain away my actions. "The gift of truth is the only one I could give our family this Christmas," he had said as he handed me my coat. "Not the truth you wanted, the convenient story where you get everything you want without consequences. But the real truth, that actions have costs, that betrayal breaks what can't be fixed, and that the people who truly love you deserve better than lies. I had no response then. I had no response now. Because in the end, Daniel had been right about everything. The affair that had seemed worth any risk in the heat of passion had cost me everything of real value in my life. And unlike the stories I had told myself during those months of deception, this ending was truly final. There would be no romantic reconciliation, no dramatic forgiveness, no return to the family we had been. That family existed only in the past now, preserved in photographs that had already begun to yellow at the edges, in memories that grew more painful with each passing day, and in the lessons I would spend the rest of my life learning about truth, consequences, and the terrible price of betrayal.